Today we have special guest Kathryn Rogers, who is the founder of Maya Moon Collective. And I'm so excited for today's conversation because it's not just a cacao cafe. There's so much more that goes into it. It's a community of people, and you have one-on-one relationships with the people you source the cacao from. Mm-hmm. And that is from Ecuador and Peru.
That's correct.
Do you travel to both places?
Yes, and I'm really excited because I have my next tour coming up at the end of March into April. So I'm going back down there to connect with the farmers, and one of the goals for this particular trip will be to shoot videos and some more photography with them, so that we can better tell their stories. So, because as of right now, it's really just relational, which is obviously lovely, and we understand their challenges and have those connections laid. And it'll be such a sweet opportunity for our customers and community here in San Diego and beyond across the U.S. to get to know them even better and to start to cultivate that sense of connection, because they'll have seen them and heard them speak and all of that too. Mm-hmm.
Yesterday I was watching one of your videos and you were talking about one of the farmers who, I think what you said was he inherited a cacao farm, and they were using pesticides, but it was starting to really affect his health. So he kind of just was like, I'm not doing this anymore. And I loved hearing everything you said about how they got to watch the land regrow. Can you retell that story?
Absolutely, yeah. So that story is in reference to Farmer Miguel Mayorga, who is on the second generation cacao farm in an area about an hour outside of Guayaquil, which is in the center of Ecuador and one of the most prominent cacao growing regions within Ecuador. And Ecuador as a country is one of the largest cacao exporting countries in the world. So this is a story that is not unfamiliar within that landscape. And so Farmer Miguel inherited the farm from his parents, and his mother still lives on the farm with him. And they have been longtime cacao farmers. And in Ecuador, as a large cacao exportation country, it's very common at this point to see heavy application of pesticides, because the model, and this is not unique to Ecuador, but the model currently across the globe is large crop yield as quickly as possible. Because in most of the world, the price for cacao beans is set by a handful of large corporations, and they say, we're going to pay you X dollar amount for your cacao, what you grow, based upon what we see as supply and demand trends. And so that's what's set, and the farms then work as quickly and diligently as they can to grow as much cacao as possible to meet that. Now, in general, with agriculture, not just cacao, when we are looking for high yield at a quick pace, which is not necessarily how nature would operate. Nature is always optimizing, so wanting to come back into balance, which means that depending on ambient conditions or whatever is happening, there will be fluctuations in production naturally, but when you're trying to quickly produce, what is very common is heavy pesticide use, typically more of a monocropping model, so only growing cacao and growing as much cacao as possible in as little space as possible. And like all plants, but especially in tropical regions, that makes the crops very susceptible to pests because there's not a lot of breathing room. There's a lot of stuff happening in tight corridors, and the cacao is under stress. Just like if we as humans were under stress, we might get more sick, right? So that's what tends to happen. So this particular farmer was operating under that environment, which is very common, and it makes sense. No blame for the farmers, of course. They're just trying to do the best to do what they know and to also make revenue and to meet the needs that are being asked of them by the exporters of the cacao. Farmer Miguel inherited this farm, and as you mentioned, just was still continuing in that practice and process, but realizing just how out of alignment it was for him, and especially for his own body. He was not feeling well. And he kind of came to this point of moral and health crisis where he was torn because he felt like his only options were to continue down that path and poison himself, literally, and his family and his community, or not. And the or not brought a lot of question marks because this was his family's legacy. It was what they knew. He felt pride in having a cacao farm and wanting to continue in their tradition. So he really was just at a loss at that point. And so, as you mentioned, he essentially just stopped. He said, I don't know what to do here, but I'm gonna just have to take a moment and figure it out. And in that process, which happened relatively quickly in the grand scheme of things, the farm started to naturally self-correct as he wasn't applying any resource to it. And it has been a process of 8 years where they've gone from what was conventional, full of pesticides and toxicity, and a lot of just dis-ease in all aspects of the operation, to a farm that is now fully regenerative. And it's so incredible to watch and witness. And they are still producing high yield, potentially not as high as what the hardcore farms are doing, but his health is better, the ecosystem is thriving. I joke that when I was sitting on that farm, I got more bug bites than in the jungles of Ecuador, which is actually true. And that is a testament to how vibrant the ecosystem is. If you can be standing in a cacao field and you're getting hit with all sorts of insects, then they are also thriving. And, you know, I think we often want to think about things being like clean and pure and like, you know, if there's no bugs there, then we want to hang out there. And while that may be true from a comfort perspective, what is also true is when you're in a robust ecosystem where you have healthy bird populations and healthy pollinator populations, and even the tiny little insects that pollinate the cacao flowers, which are the most minute, we want there to be a robust flora and fauna, and that includes from the ground up. And so it's really an incredible story. It's so inspiring. And that's just one example. This is happening in many places. And for me to get to be there and witness and hear from them just what was possible when he chose to take a step back and to really let nature lead the process. And through that, they also discovered so much about the ecosystem. They came to learn about an aquatic plant that is native to that region in Ecuador that grows wild. It's essentially just something that's in water systems. And it's an incredible water purifier. And so they started collecting just off the side of the road buckets of this plant and dumping it into their irrigation canals. And this plant naturally absorbs any sort of chemicals or pesticides or toxicity. So they completely cleansed all of the water in their farm, which had been contaminated by both their farm's pesticide use, but also adjacent farms, just through a natural plant that exists there, right? So the ecosystem knew exactly what was needed. It was just a matter of them observing and recognizing, oh, if we stop adding toxicity and we allow what's native to this region to work in the way that it knows how, it wasn't that complex. And it did take that wisdom and insight from him and his team to recognize, like, what we've been doing isn't working and isn't going to work in the long term. So what can we do? And it was really through the practice of listening to nature and listening to the plants. And there's so many aspects to it. They also observed, just by paying attention, that their fruit started to get sweeter. The cacao fruit started to get sweeter and take on more robust flavors. And it was because there were fruit trees around the property. So they had banana and papaya and mango, and as the entire ecosystem started to get healthier, those trees were fruiting more, and the cross-pollination that was happening actually changed the flavor of their cacao, which is so beautiful, and it's so delicious. Oh my goodness, it has this incredible, you can taste like caramelized banana notes and like a fruity aftertaste that almost has acidity. It's gorgeous. And that's because their ecosystem is so healthy and thriving. So now they're excited to have intercropping, which also just helps the entire environment be healthier, because as you have more biodiversity, you attract more different bird species, and all of those different fruits are better for the pollinator communities too, because they have more diversity of the pollen that they collect, which also helps their immune system. So it's just so awesome that nature, A, is so wise, and B, just in allowing it to do its thing and giving it the space to breathe, that they're doing something really unique and different. And the last thing I'll say about that is what's been amazing in partnering with them is A, hearing their story and learning where they're at, and B, we've been able to work with them to understand from our side of things, like what is needed from the supply chain perspective, not about certain quantities or certain price points. We're very happy to work with them directly to make sure that they're receiving a proper living wage for what they're producing. That's not what I mean, but what I mean is that when we first met Farmer Miguel, they were producing cacao paste, which is what we use here to make all of our drinking cacao blends, one of which we're enjoying right now. And cacao paste is essentially fermented, dried, lightly roasted, and then ground cacao beans or seeds to make it into this smooth texture. And then we use that, we grind it up to make our drinks. There's a certain amount of smoothness required to be able to produce a really silky, delicious drink, which is what our customers know and love. So when we first met Farmer Miguel, we worked with him to get some changes to the equipment that he was using so we could receive his product in a way that made it really palatable for our customers, which he was also happy to do. So this is what happens when you're having these full circle relationships, is that there's direct communication and a feedback loop where now we can all work together to make it more viable for him to distribute his products more widely. And simultaneously, we get to support a farmer that's an incredible leader for his farm and the surrounding community of what's possible in beyond sustainable to regenerative growing practices.
It's so inspiring because he was faced with this situation and he didn't know what to do. And it probably felt really limiting at the time because all he knew was what he knew. And I think that's an issue most people face, is we've grown up in this way of being, so we think this is the only way. And for him to take a chance and to let things go and just see what happens is so beautiful.
It's amazing. And another really sweet piece of all of this is, as he and his team have learned and observed more and been working in harmony with nature, they're building this model that one of their goals that they're working towards is to be able to socialize that to other farms. So they did the hard work in taking those 8 years to really learn those practices, and what they're now pitching to other farms is, hey, you can do this too.
Yeah.
And here's the way to do it. So it's taking what they've learned. And obviously, there is immense power in observation and listening, and the living, breathing experience, I don't think can be fully replicated.
Yeah.
And for them to share the insights that they gleaned, so people can do that more quickly without the potential pain or stress of having a farm take the time that it needs to turn over and to learn. It'll quicken that process to some extent, which will also make it more viable for more farms to follow their lead.
Yeah.
And then it'll help the entire broader ecosystem to start to heal itself and rebalance. And it's really amazing. I mean, you think about how long these practices have been in place, which is at least 30 years or more of using heavy pesticides and all of these things. And 8 years, and the farm is so healthy, vibrant, thriving, and they're not applying anything outside of what's in their ecosystem there. So one thing that they do have on their farm is neem trees, and neem is this incredible natural antifungal, and so they sometimes will gather the oil from the neem seeds and actually fumigate their fields, so you basically just like make an incense and walk with it, and any sort of dampness or moldiness, or because cacao trees are very sensitive just because they're growing in natural environments. So that neem will help to rebalance it, but it literally grows right next to the cacao tree. So even for that capacity to observe and recognize, like when there is a need for a little adjustment in the system, we can just look and here it is, this is exactly what we need.
Yeah, thank you for
so
sharing
cool.
that. When did this vision start for you?
Thank you for asking. I first sat with cacao in a ceremony at a festival in Northern California, and this was over 10 years ago now, and it was served by a couple guys visiting from Argentina, and it was beautiful. It was rich and creamy, this sweet drink that was enticing, and the whole experience was really transformational. They served it with music and this beautiful connection, and it was the opening ceremony for this weekend gathering, and it awakened something in me. I was really intrigued by it. And for me personally, I was already very passionate into functional foods, and I grew up and have continued to work through an allergy to heavily processed sugars. So I was always seeking in my own life places to find yummy treats that didn't make me feel sick. And so prior to launching My Immune, I had developed a whole line of naturally sweetened desserts using raw honey or maple syrup or other things. Simultaneously was in this place of curiosity around connection to the earth and connection to higher awareness and all these things. And cacao is such a forerunner, especially more recently, kind of in this resurgence of connection to this plant. And so from that point 10 years ago, I had a farm-to-table catering company and had this natural dessert line that wanted to evolve into something more scalable. And simultaneously, cacao kind of kept popping up from that first introduction point. And I just became intrigued by the plant medicine of cacao, and on a personal journey just started sitting more and more in meditation with cacao in my own practice. And through that, just learned more and more about the plant and its frequency. And so in 2017, I got the idea, actually, when contemplating an event to bring with a local yoga teacher. She was teaching a class called Vinyasa Yoga connected to the chakras. And she was like, oh, I want to do it with chocolate, because she's from Brazil, and chocolate and cacao are so prominent. And she reached out to me, and we just started kind of ideating. And this concept for doing chakra chocolates came from that experience. And so I was meditating and reflecting on ways to bring with the cacao different plants and herbs and fruits to connect to each energy center in the body, and got this very clear download around the specific flavors, and then did a bunch of research, and what I had received in my intuition was very aligned with Ayurveda, and it just all fell into place. So that event happened many years ago now, and it was so much fun, and people loved getting to eat and move their bodies, and it was just this celebration, and everything just started kind of picking up from there. I learned more about cacao, and then in 2019, right before the pandemic, I went to a conference hosted by the Fine Chocolate Industry Association, which brings together all people involved in cocoa production at all levels. So cacao farmers, chocolate processing equipment makers, chocolatiers, the whole spectrum. And we all gathered in San Francisco at this incredible event. And one thing that really sparked my excitement even more than it had already been percolating was just how collaborative that entire group was. There were over 150 chocolatiers there making products that in many industries would be seen as competitive, right? Different chocolate bars, all these things. And all everybody wanted to do was to share their love for cacao and to connect and to share resources and to help each other. And it made me so joyous to feel like it was possible to play within that industry and to get to work in a landscape where that depth of authentic connection was possible. And I wholeheartedly believe, based on what I know of cacao, because she is this master connector that just loves harmonious relationships. That's what cacao brings forward, is this opening of the heart space and this capacity to want to connect and want to build together. And then there was this whole industry in craft chocolate that was doing that so authentically and beautifully, and it just was a resounding yes for me. It brought together everything that I love most in life, which is health, and cacao is this incredible superfood full of different nutrients and health benefits, and sustainability, or beyond sustainability. So how can we work together to support our bodies and in turn support healthy, vibrant, thriving ecosystems locally and globally? And then community connection. How do we come together in celebration and expansion in relationship with those other pieces? And cacao offers that. So it was a natural fit. And since 2018, the company's been growing. And the space where we find ourselves here at Maya Moon Collective, I opened about a year and a half ago, August of 2021. And it really was the culmination of all of the work that I had been doing thus far, and has now become this sweet launching pad for new collaborations to come.
I find that as I grow older, everything that I do is like a culmination of what I've done in the past. Like everything's just building on itself.
100%.
I have a question for you about responsibility. My project is prspctvswtch, this YouTube channel, and sometimes I find myself taking on responsibility that's not really mine. Like, oh, I want to help the world and help people open up their minds and their perspectives and feel better and all this stuff. The more perceived responsibility I take on, it kind of feels like taking on the world on my shoulders. But I think there's a flaw in that in seeing it like that, and maybe acting more from inspiration and creativity and just love and being really present. Do you ever feel like a heavy sense of responsibility?
Thank you for asking that. I think this is such a relevant question, especially in the realms that we find ourselves in, the broader collective consciousness, and there's so many layers to it. And I actually want to touch on a topic that I absolutely love, and this could be a whole deep dive in and of itself, so I'll keep it topical and will encourage people, if this interests them, to research it more. But there's this concept called the triangle of disempowerment that talks about how we can disempower ourselves and other people by occupying any role within the triangle. And the 3 roles are victim, persecutor, and rescuer. So what I hear you talking about a little bit in the notion of feeling responsible for all the problems of the world is kind of embodying or being in that frequency of the rescuer, where we feel like it's our responsibility to fix something or to fix everything, and it's a heavy burden to bear. And what you said is so on point, because if we are in any role in the triangle, we are disempowering ourselves and also disempowering those that we aim to help in the role of the rescuer, because we're saying in some level that because I'm trying to save you, you're not able to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And then that creates victims, and then the victims often become persecutors, et cetera. So we're all in this kind of sea of disempowerment, which in big picture really isn't serving anybody, right? Yeah. And it's commonplace. This is pervasive within our culture and collective awareness right now. And it's just, for me, I love just having that contextual awareness, because when I find myself in any of those roles and feeling disempowered or disheartened, it's like, wait a second, what is actually operating here? What is happening here? It's just that good little checkpoint. And like you mentioned, the way, not even out of the triangle, but to transcend the triangle, is to operate from a place of inspiration and love. Because now we are moving from a place of disempowerment to empowerment. What does it feel like when I am choosing to act from a place of alignment, from clarity of function and purpose? And in that process, we are now a beacon for really being grounded in our own personal power, personal awareness, using our innate skills and gifts to create positive shifts in the world. And now we can bring people into our realm and frequency and energy field where they too are inspired and uplifted, right? It's a total shift in frequency. So yes, I often feel the weight of responsibility. And it is true that in running a business, as Maya Moon has grown, we are responsible for more and more people. You know, I now have 12 humans that work for me in Maya Moon, right? So I am responsible to run the business in a way that makes it possible for us to pay them properly and to also create a supportive, enriching environment for them. So there are many things that I have gotten to take on as Maya Moon has grown. And yes, I feel, in many ways, I feel like the mother kind of leading this movement, and also responsible to our community, ensuring that first and foremost, that I am in integrity with my own core values around health, sustainability, and connection. And secondly, to make sure that the business is integrity with its founding principles as well. And there have been moments, 100%, where I have made decisions out of scarcity or fear that have pulled us away from that. And so it's a continual practice and process to check back in, to tune back in, to observe that which feels out of alignment, or maybe things that just aren't working, and to say, why is that happening? Both from a logistical perspective of maybe there aren't proper systems or strategies in place, and also from an energetic perspective of where are we operating out of integrity in some way. And that's an evolution and practice. I think it can be problematic to think about it as black and white, like especially the realm that I think about this most in is in regards to sustainability, because that is 100% a spectrum, right? And I think many times, especially kind of in the black and white polarized world that we find ourselves in, it's like it either is or it isn't. And that's just not realistic. We are always moving towards something better, and as we know better, we can do better. So I think it's also about staying open and curious and first and foremost aware of your core values, your guideposts and principles, and continually coming back. And when there's an observation of feeling like, oh, something slipped there, to refine it and come back to that. And then to continually stay open that as we learn more, as new opportunities present, as there's ways to continue to work and grow and build together, to always have that desire in mind and to move towards. So as we're like simultaneously moving along the spectrum and moving up in what's possible as we have more resources, more awareness, all of that.
Yeah, I see that you're a leader, and I think it's really inspiring. And what I love about it is you're really practical, but you also do have that spiritual foundation. How does that kind of come together, practicality and spirituality?
Thank you for asking, and thank you. I am more and more accepting the role that you mentioned of feeling like leadership in some way.
Yeah.
And it's challenging for me because I believe first and foremost that humility is important, and also understanding the responsibilities that we carry, right? Mm-hmm. So if I am to continue on this path and this work, and Maya Moon is on a beautiful growth trajectory, and I have to remind myself that the more that this entity grows, the more we're going to be able to support more farmers and their work on the ground level, and the more we're going to be able to connect people across the world with this powerful heart-opening medicine of cacao.
Yeah.
So those are the things that keep me grounded within myself, and even motivated, because in those moments where it starts to feel personal or like it's about me, that actually creates disconnection and disharmony for me. So it's this interesting balance point, because for whatever reason, my life experience, and you mentioned that as we kind of grow, that life becomes a culmination of experiences had. And my first background, my first career, I worked for 10 years doing marketing for a variety of health organizations.
Okay.
And I did brand experience design, and I was working for the government for a period of time. I was working for public health organizations. I was working within university research systems. So I got this really practical training in diplomacy and building from the ground up, and working within systems that had a lot of constraints and that were really slow moving in the ways that they could really evolve and change, right? It's like when you're in government especially, things are very entrenched, and there's many layers of approvals and processes that you have to kind of work through to get somewhere. So those experiences taught me a lot of patience. They taught me how to sit at a table with players and stakeholders at multiple levels and thought processes, and how to find kind of like a thread within that. And at that point in time, I actually felt internally very out of alignment, because there wasn't space for more of the spiritual part of me. And so also at that point in time, I was working with a business coach, because I knew that I wanted to create something, and I always have had this entrepreneurial spirit of wanting to build and pioneer a new territory. That was a spark within me, and I wasn't actualizing that at that point in my career, in my day-to-day life. And so I remember having this conversation with a career coach. And I was also, at that point, chairing the local chapter of Slow Food. So I was plugged into the local food system. And there was a call that we had that was like a bell ringing. And we were talking, and I just heard this message that it is possible to have your work be plugged into everything you believe in, which is the spiritual connection, business, sustainability, health, that all of those things could come together. And I don't think that I fully believed that that was possible before that moment. So from that spark, that was when things started to shift, even just in my internal landscape of trust. And then it was putting the building blocks in motion. So for whatever reason, this culmination of experiences and skills that I've gathered over time and learned from all these different paths and careers have come to form and have made it possible for me to do this work and to keep moving forward. And how I continue to find balance in that, I think I'm naturally pragmatic, I'm naturally strategic in how I think about things, and there is this deep spirituality and wanting to go all the way through to really understand and unpeel like the layers and all of that. So even in my day-to-day practice, that's where it becomes actualized, right? No matter what our innate talents are, it's in how we show up every day in our lives that actually informs our perspective and how we're experiencing and moving through life. So there are many days where I find myself wanting to just work for 16 hours because there's this list of things to get done and I'm excited and, we're just chipping away and keep going. And there have been many points in this journey where I find myself, because of that focus, exhausted and drained. And each time that happens, it's a reminder to come back to connection to spirit, whether that's through embodied awareness and honoring and nourishing my body, or sitting with cacao in meditation and coming back. So thankfully, everything that's been created within this context and container has always been grounded first and foremost by the vision and insight that cacao offers. So much of what I've built in this realm is because of insights or ideas or points of inspiration that I've received while meditating with cacao, including the opening of Maya Moon and the name. I was sitting with cacao in a meditation circle many years ago, and the spirit was so strong. She came to me so clear in this moment. I will never forget it. And she said to me, you are going to have a daughter and her name will be Maya Luna. And it was like this such a powerful, clear transmission. And then life evolved and continued, and Maya Moon didn't exist at that point in time. Starting to play more with chocolate, but it was very much on a path of evolution. And then as brand names arose, the name Maya Moon came back into the fold. Mm-hmm. And it was after that I meditated again with cacao, and she said, "Don't you remember what I told you?" And I was like, oh my gosh. Yes.
Wow.
So it's fascinating to me. We as humans are these very curious embodiments of material realm awareness, right? We're in this embodied form and simultaneously tuned into spirit that flows down through us and from the earth into us and is held within this vessel. And so I feel like when we're really paying attention, that it is that too, right? It's the pragmatic materialization of form. We have these hands that can actually pick things up and shift matter. Mm-hmm. And when we're listening and paying attention, we are so tuned in to the intercosmic breath of all life. And it's hard, especially when those doors start to open, to not feel that connection. And for me, when I start to get in too far in the pragmatic realm, just because life gets busy and full, it's always remembering to come back to connection to spirit, and especially connection to cacao, and to ask her, where do you want to go from here? And to remember that more than anything, the intention of this space is to be a clear transmission for cacao's wisdom and that medicine, and what are the most optimized ways that I myself can continue to share that in some form. And there's so many. Cacao is such an incredible plant because she is making this resurgence, and it's becoming more and more accessible and available, which is so beautiful. And honestly, considering how powerful cacao as a plant medicine is, it's incredible how accessible it is. There's so many plant medicines that are still illegal or really kind of hard to access, or almost like hiding in the jungles. Mm-hmm. And cacao is here. She's been here. Chocolate's been around for a long time. And so we have the good fortune of having ease and access to this plant. Now we get to remember its spirit and innate expression and its depth. And that's what I intend to offer and continue to do. And as long as that call is clear and the spirit of the plant and cacao want to continue to work through me in this space, then that motivates me to keep showing up.
Yeah, thank you for that. The first time I had cacao was at Trilogy Sanctuary, and it was the beginning of my consciously aware that I was on this spiritual journey in life. So I was super, super curious. And I went to a ceremony led by Carla. You might know her. She's been around a lot. But it was something that I had never experienced. We all passed little cups of cacao around, and we prayed and set intention, said gratitude. We chanted, did some yoga, and we danced. And I left feeling so amazing. And so grateful that there was this thing that like this medicine that changes our state of being, changes our perspective, where I grew up with a lot of alcohol and getting really drunk and partying. And it was just this whole new world that is healthy for us. So it played and still plays a really big role in my life. Thinking about a morning where I get to wake up and make a cup of cacao and sit with it and say my gratitude and set an intention for the day is just something that I look forward to. And I love getting to share it with the world because it is super accessible and it's well known in San Diego, but there's other parts that people don't really know about it. So I'm here to bring more awareness to it.
Thank you. I'm just so happy to hear, and Trilogy is such an amazing space and has been really a leader in, I think, San Diego in so many ways of cultivating those connections and those sparks, you know, and experiences where there is a shift. When we first launched, I talked about this place is like it's creating a delicious shift in some form, right? And whether it's eating a chocolate truffle or a piece of cake or drinking this incredible rich ceremonial drink, like something is happening within us, you know, and no matter if we're just embarking on cultivating a deeper connection with something happening around us and within us, or we are many steps along in that journey, right? It's something that everyone can access and find something wherever they're at. And ideally it will be that sweet spark like you talk about that cultivates a path or an opening or a new conversation or a deepening in relationship to self or someone else. And I wholeheartedly believe that through these pathways of opening that we can find in our day-to-day reality, especially with Cacao's support, that we will together create a more heart-centered world where we are living and leading with love. And to me, and there's so many ways to access it, it's not that cacao is the only path. That is absolutely not true. And she is this sweet, yummy, decadent, enticing doorway. And so I'm just so grateful for our connection and how cacao brought us together to have this conversation. And thank you for your choice to be curious and exploring and sharing the things that spark joy in you, and as well as what other people are doing to start to create more of that as well.
Of course. If someone's watching this and they feel like they're a leader and they want to create something in the world, but they just don't know what to do, they don't know where to start, what advice would you give them?
Ooh, great question. I think it's a combination of getting really clear on your core values, and that is an inside job that can come through journaling or meditation or going somewhere or doing something where you connect to a sense of joy and inspiration. And starting there and really observing, what is it that lights me up? What are the things in life that I feel compelled to want to invest my time, energy, resources towards? And what are my innate talents and gifts, right? And start to make a list, or, you know, a list within yourself of what those are. And if you can narrow them down to a handful of both gifts, things that you're really good at, and things that spark your curiosity, where if you were to become obsessed with them, that you would enjoy that, you know? Whether that's health or sustainability or, you know, women's empowerment or being organized, right? You name it. There's so many ways that it's like, ooh, this is the thing that if in my free time, I want to be learning about, I want to be researching about. Whether that's, I have a friend who's an incredible organizer, and in her free time she loves to clean, which for me is like not something that brings me joy, but it's so cool because that's very unique to her and she loves it. And that clarity can then start to be that spark of inspiration. And if you are just embarking and wanting to build confidence, I would say spend as much time as you can in those realms. Even if it's, for me personally, when I was still working in the corporate world, I felt this internal like agitation because I knew that I wanted to do more, but I didn't know or even believe fully at that point that I was capable, or that it was possible. And it was through exploration and coming back to self and just understanding, first feeling the discomfort of what was not working or what felt out of alignment, and letting that discomfort be this kind of activation of energy that can become a catalyst. But it took many years. It took 7 years for me from that point of starting to feel that discomfort to feeling confident and prepared to take the leap. So it is definitely a journey, and not that it has to take 7 years. I think each of our path and timing is unique. And it's starting to take action bit by bit and finding places where you can start to practice those things, those talents, those gifts in a way that is still supportive. Because, from a more pragmatic perspective, everyone has different thresholds of risk, and I wouldn't necessarily advocate for people just like, I'm going to quit my job tomorrow and jump off a cliff and figure it out. We have to build up, and everything that we're doing now has pathways of learning that will help us on our journey also. And so it's kind of being in that realm of allowing for the discomfort to help to continue to catalyze and clarify, right? So I always say that all discomfort or anxiety is a pathway towards desire. So if we can look at that which doesn't feel good in our world and see that as, okay, well, if this is out of alignment, what do I want? And if we can take it almost like a thread, pulling it up and send it out as, this is a desire, this is a desire, this is a desire. If we continue to do that, over time, the energies are going to become more clear and more supportive and aligned. And that point in time will come. And in the meantime, it's finding ways to, whether that's through volunteering or going to networking events or starting to plug into spaces where that spark of inspiration is accessible, and continuing to build and grow. And then you just never know when an opportunity will arise or where the magic of that awareness will come to form, and it'll be so clear at some point of like, it is time to take that leap. I've done the work, I've built a foundation, I'm ready now. Or you never know, perhaps just a new opportunity pops up seemingly out of nowhere where it's like, oh my goodness, yes. And the last thing I would offer is that even when you are fully on your path, whatever that might look like, there will always be speed bumps, which are opportunities to slow down, to reflect, to reconnect. And so this concept of like always going to feel good once you're operating from a point of alignment, I just think that's definitely not been my experience. There are many moments where I continue to question, is this the right thing? Am I on the right path? Am I doing this the best way possible? That is when I get to come back to those core values, which is why I suggest starting there. If you can have clarity around your core values, and if you can check in with yourself and know, am I following those core values? Am I living in integrity with myself first and foremost? At least for me, that's what, if I can say yes to that, then it gives me a strong foundation to continue to get up in the morning, because I feel like I'm living my highest truth. And everything else is just the joy of the ride,
Yeah, thank you so much. Everything you just shared was a lot, but I resonate with all of it on my journey. And the one thing I want to say is finding that thing that lights you up. I feel like it's so important to do that, because even when I'm exhausted, I'm like, yeah, but I can still keep editing videos. Like, I'm thoroughly enjoying this. But if you're doing something that you don't really care about, it's so much easier to just go to sleep. It's so much easier to just take a break. And that's something that I realized while on this YouTube journey that I wanted to reiterate, because it's like we don't know until we know. We hear so many things and we hear it all the time, but until we actually experience it and live it, it's like something clicks, and almost like an epiphany.
I love that. Well, thank you for sharing your talents and passions in this way too, so there can be this place of transmission for these messages. It's so important.
And I agree, throughout my journey with, even though I feel like I'm living in alignment, it hasn't just been a smooth, yes, I love my life every day and all the time. It's been this constant reevaluating. Am I doing what I really want to do? Am I doing the best that I can do? Am I living in my values? Am I living out of fear? And as challenging as stepping into that thing that you really want to do can be, it feels so rewarding. It feels so good. It feels like I don't want to live my life any other way.
100%. I often say that entrepreneurship is the most intense spiritual path that exists, because you also get the opportunity, especially if you're working for yourself or choosing for yourself where you're investing your time and energies. We get to look at ourselves and our own stumbling blocks, our own beliefs that maybe aren't serving us or that are holding us back every day. It's this living, breathing reflection. We've removed the safety net of a system or an organization that's buffering that for us. And so it's this constant opportunity to really get a clear look. And, you know, for me personally on this journey, there are so many layers, beliefs around partnership, beliefs around being supported, beliefs around worthiness, beliefs around money. Like, that shows up in so many layers, and each time they arise, the opportunity is I get to do the work within myself so that I can continue to move forward and the business can continue to move forward. And that's, I think it's a necessity, especially when we're doing work that is value aligned and frequency aligned. And so it's a daily ceremony. It's a daily ritual practice, you know? And it takes courage, but to your point, it also is deeply fulfilling. And what better to do with our time here in this life than to learn and evolve and to utilize our innate gifts to add value or to make a contribution.
One more thing I want to add to that is, from my perspective, when we're checking in with our values and then we're deciding what we truly want to do with life, it's so unique to every single person. So there's so much unknown and uncertainty in that, because no one's ever done this before. We don't know how it looks. We don't know how it's going to look in the future. And I think that's what's scary for me.
I totally hear you on that. Yeah, pioneering new territory. There is a quote, I don't remember where I read it, but it talks about what true leadership is, which is not the ability to follow a map, but rather to stand in the void and to make a choice in real time as to where to go from there.
Wow.
And that is, I love that. Like, it gives me chills even just to say that, because it's like, whoa, like, that's no joke of aligned action. And that is scary, because we are choosing in real time where to go and how to step forward. And it's entirely new. Nature is such a powerful teacher and guide. And when I think about that, I think about her and the way that that nature takes every data point gathered from this point and all of the experiences of life and offers constantly new species, new things that are expressions of everything that has happened before. And we too get to do that, right? We can create something entirely new based upon what we know and basing on deep self-trust to feel like, what is the best choice in this moment? But that comes from this vessel of darkness. When I think about leading through the void into somewhere new, I think about like the pioneers, you know, on ships going across waters to find like lands that have never been discovered before, or whatever that might look like, or even just a seed sprouting out of the earth to create, you know, this incredible plant, but it's sitting in the depths of the darkness, and all it has is its innate inner knowing and trust, and that's what allows it to burst forth.
Yeah, that's something I wanted to talk about, trust, because you mentioned these little points of seeing maybe unworthiness or lack of money or all these other things that I experience too. But I also get to experience seeing where I don't trust myself and where I can trust myself. It's been really relevant in my life, trusting how I want to spend my time and saying no to people and no to things has been really big.
I
for
love
me.
that. I am so about boundaries and sacred no's and how that creates an opportunity and space for the yeses.
Yeah.
You know, that's such
Yeah.
a great, and yes, that requires immense self-awareness and immense trust.
Yeah.
Because it can be so easy to fall into a scarcity perspective of, if I say no to this, will this opportunity ever come back around, or am I missing out, or whatever that might look
Yeah.
like. And it's, you know, to really breathe into self-awareness and to say, even if I can't see the thing that's behind me because I'm facing this direction, I believe that there is something there, or there will be something there. So this is a no for me. I'm just going to let that be.
Yeah.
And that's creating that container, that openness within, where it's not full of all the things, right? When we have space, that's where new things can flow.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that reminder. Is there anything else you would like to say?
I would just like to offer, first of all, thank you so much for this opportunity, and thank you for following your path in this ways so that these conversations can happen. I'm so
Yeah.
grateful to be here with you. And I would just love to invite everyone, if they have not yet had the opportunity to spend a moment with cacao, to find a cup somewhere in your community, or to go online and look for organic or ceremonial grade cacao, and to take a moment to sit with this plant and to see what she might have to offer, because it's powerful and beautiful and heart opening and connective. And I believe that there is deep wisdom available to us if we just give ourselves that opportunity to tune in and receive and open our hearts.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.